All right, so let's get started now. We are looking at our JavaScript, our calculator app now. So what we want to do is to write a program that does simple mathematical operations for us. And we have looked at those mathematical operations using operators. So we've seen operators that we can use to perform those functions. So let me first of all start up our application with live server. So then we have to link our files as usual. We have to link our JavaScript file. So we say script, then we have our sroc for the.
I can't see your screen, sir. I can't see your screen.
Okay. I think I stopped sharing for a while. Let me share the screen again. Okay, I hope you can see the screen now. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I can see the screen, sir.
Okay, that's perfect. All right, the first file we've added now is our script calculator.js. So we now need to add our link for our CSS. Okay, let me just pick this from here, CSS, and then the link is dot CSS. Okay, I think it's still nice to reference the folder. So let's look at the we have our title. So let's have our, let's say, our history, and then we say
Please, sir. Sorry, sir. I have a question. Why do you put only one dot in front of when you're adding CSS?
yeah, it's the same thing with
When
the
you want to link,
JS. What it means is they are both in the same location. The file we are working on now and the one we want to reference is they are both in the same folder. So if you check here, they are all inside calculator folder. If we want to reference the ones under this area, like in the JS, in the JS folder, we have to put dot dot so that we now move out of the calculator folder into the other folders. But all of them are in calculator folder, so the dot is saying this folder. If we remove the dot and still leave it like this, it will first of all check on that folder where the file is, which is fine. But referencing it like this, I usually just do it that way to reference the same folder where we are. And that is fine. If we look at our browser now, we should be able to see our calculator for message. Let me, okay. Yeah. Okay, so we now have our calculator folder. So what we'll do here now, we'll create a div. Let's use a div, and then we say, I think let me put it everything here inside the div. It's a container to hold the content we are working on, and then we'll put this here. Then we'll put this and say this should be our test editor or test input. The start should be, let's call it test input. Okay, under the test input, we have input, then this test, then we'll make it read only so that you don't type anything on it. So let's save our code. I have to remove this alert, it's going to become a disturbance.
please, sorry, sir. I've not used Visual Studio. Please, when you like now this place you typed input, you only typed input. But what do you now press before it now bring out both type, text, all this?
Okay, you just need to save it. Once you have run your live server, just need to save the file. Live server will pick it from there. You do get it?
Okay, if I type input, it will the thing it will come out all
Okay,
like
all this, yes.
mm,
Yeah, VS Code
uh,
does that for you. Just if you type input like this, these are suggestions, things that VS Code web. So if you're looking for input, type BTN button, checkbox, just click any one of them and VS Code will do the rest and to give you the syntax to put them, including any type of this input. See, this is image input, any type of them. So even if you're
okay.
button, you mustn't start typing HTML input in VS Code with this syntax like less than, you put the button. Once you type button like this, VS Code will do something for you in that, give you syntax on auto suggestions or completion what you can do. So now we put the button for submit and we are seeing the syntax, and then it will move the cursor to where you are supposed to type something now. So in this case, ours is the input. We have given the input. So now we'll create another container and then we'll call it the buttons. So this one contains all our buttons. So when you put dot and then you put the name, what VS Code does is that anything you type after the dot is going to be considered as a class. In CSS, to define your class selector, you use dot for them. So VS Code is going to take that way. What you are putting here is a class. So it will create a div and then put what you type as the class of the div. So like I said, this is dot and put buttons. These buttons now is going to become the class of the div. So as I hit enter, it will not generate this line for me and then put the cursor where I'm supposed to work on. So now this is going to contain our buttons. And if we look at the calculator now, these are, what am I saying? Okay, these are the buttons we are expecting to work on. We'll ignore this line, then we'll begin with this percentage, on some of this, but we will not, what we implement first is the actions, division, multiplication, subtraction, and the rest of them. All right, so let's continue. Now, let's look at the screen again, the calculator, and look at what we are doing. So we are going to have a grid of 4 lines. Now, so let's begin. Our first row is going to be the first item on top is our modules, and then we have our CE, and then we have our C, and then we'll have our delete icon. So let's begin with them. So the first button we have here now, I call the button, and then what is going to be inside is percentage sign. Okay, then let me give it an ID and say percent. So I create another button. This button will then be, let's look at the calculator again. I think I need to just keep it on the screen. Yeah, so we can work on. So the next one is CE. So let me also give it the ID CE. The ID is something that you identifies this particular element on the HTML uniquely. So no two elements on the HTML we are working on that will have the same ID. Both of every element will have their unique ID. If you don't give it for them, JavaScript, the browser does the work on the identifying them. It means you won't also be bothered. You don't want to uniquely identify them, which is not a problem. So in order to do that, when you want to create an ID along, when you want at the same time, the way you do dot the class name, what you do is to put hash. In CSS, hash is used to represent an ID. So when you put hash, you type what you want to type. Like in this case, I just want to type C, the ID is C, and then I hit. It's also going to recognize it and add it to the ID. So in this case now, the next one we are doing, we are working on a delete sign. So just call the delete. and then the ID is delete. So what we put there is the delete. But in this case, that is an image. Let's just first of all write there so we can think of the image later. So instead of div here, I think what we are looking for is buttons. What we are looking for is buttons. So I was mistakenly creating divs. The difference between div and button is the button are meant to be clickable. JavaScript and the browser knows that this is a clickable element. You can equally make a div clickable element, but they are not made for such activities at first. So we have done our first row. So I comment this first row, first row. Okay. So now we are doing our second row. If you look at our screen now, we have all of them here. They are here, although they are not looking as we would have wanted. That is work for another time. Okay, gifts have arrived. So let's look at the elements in the second row. And then the second row, we have 1 over x, s square, and then those, I will also use image to represent these ones, although I think we can do them with code. So the next button is, so to put I will see button, half, let's say half, I think that is what it is, half, and then we'll put 1 over x, then we'll put the next one button. What are we looking at? X square hash x2, that's x square. And then what we are writing there, we also write x square. We'll look for later, they had to transform that into square like this using code, or we just use image to represent them. So the next one we'll have is button, and then square roots. So we just put as square SQ roots, SQ arrow, square roots. I think that is okay. And then we put square root. We also represent the sign. So let's just put square SQ arrow first. Okay, then we look at the next one is division button, divide. Then we put our division sign. So we use this. Okay, then we are done with our second row. So we now look at our third row.
Sir, please, I have
Okay,
please I can from the code you are typing,
yeah.
but I think this like this first row that is having a percentage CE and I think since is a different row. I will not to put because after putting the first four buttons, you didn't end your div. But I'm seeing it at the end. Why is it coming at the, instead of coming like since we have finished this one is a one row? Why not putting that div here? And now we're leaving the div at the bottom.
Yeah, what we'll use CSS to do that. CSS, with CSS we can control how these things appear. Though we put them like this, that with CSS we can control how they appear. Like if we come here, our body here, we can decide that this thing should not be more than 100 pages. So we can say our width should be, let's say, fit content. If we save here, you see that this background, that this is a different background here other than the other side. I hope you can notice that. Do you notice that where we have things now and the other side, the background is different?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let me just make it more obvious. So you see that we are changing how our page looks
Yes.
now with CSS. Then we can also say our text color. Sorry, text color is just color. Our color should be white. So I can then say the ghost white I wanted to use. So if we save here now, things are, and then we are not using, we use CSS to do most of those things you are talking about. So if we say align items as a center, Save. I want to do just align, test align, say center. Okay, see things are changing. Okay, so let me remove this fit content. Okay, I think it's okay for us, but what I need to do now is to add padding to create space. So create padding of 20 pesos. Then we have space around our work. So we can also make it to protrude, make it to look like a card. So this is not a problem. Now let's first create all the input we need, all the buttons. We'll create them, we'll style them, make them look nice later on. I hope that's okay. You understand what we are doing now?
Yes, sir.
All right, so the next one we are doing now is button 8. So we still say button #8. And then you see, I'm using numbers, though, which is taken as a string for our ID. That's not a problem. We also say button 9, and then we put 9. And then the last one in the row is button multiplication. We say button X. We already have X, I guess. So no, we have C. Okay, so I've just got leave button X. So we have button #X, and then we put our X for multiplication. Okay, so we now have our fourth row. Fourth row. Okay, and then in our fourth row we have 4, 5, 6, and minus. So I'm just copying this now and then bring down here. We know what we are doing now. We have 4, and then here is 4. Then we have 5, and then the ID is 5. We have 6, and then we have 6. Then we have dash for minus subtraction. Then we also have, let's call sub here. Okay, so we now go to our fifth row. Fifth row. Then we also paste this. The first one is 1, 2, 3 plus. So we have 1, 2, up 2, 3, have 3, and then plus we have add. Okay, then the last row we now have plus over this sign. So many things in this calculator. Should have been. I think I would have just taken the one that have only. I just consider only the numbers and the arithmetic, simple arithmetic operation, but that is fine. So this is the sixth row. Some of the features here, and you people will implement it as an assignment. Sixth row. So we have the next one. Let's say add slash sub. That is the ID. And then we have plus minus. And then we have 0. We have 0. Let me call this 0 here. Then we have dot. Have dot here. So we have dot. And then the last one we have equal sign. Then we have less equal. Okay, so now we have all our features, all the inputs ready. So let's go back to our CSS. You remember the parent div, we called it actions. Is it actions or buttons? I think it's buttons I called it. So let's look at, we call it buttons. So let's create the button class now in our CSS. So we say buttons. Now we want this button to be grid, to display as grid. Grid is a layout style in CSS that makes, what grid does, it helps to easily position elements in rows and columns. This is a row from X percent to a delete sign here is a row. Then from percentage here now to this other one is also is a column. So grid help us to place things in rows and column. We can position things where we want in rows and columns. So if we come here now and said display, this display is telling the browser how it should render these things, and we say grid. And then we'll say now grid templates columns. Now the template columns is going to talk about how many columns we want. I think let's look at it here. We say four. Okay, sorry, this is the wrong syntax. What we want to do now, let's take a 1F arrow. 1F arrow is talking about the fraction of it, just one. And then we'll create this 1F arrow into four because we need it to be four. We also have another 1F arrow, 1F arrow. All of them are equal. And then we save. So just by adding this, you see that our calculator has taken shape. I guess you see how simple it is now to position them rather than creating those div and trying to put them by yourself or creating a table. Just with this, we have been able to create a well-rounded looking calculator, everything positioned in the way we want it. So, Chinedu, do you see the effect of what we've done now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, so that is a short way of adding this in case like when you have 20 of you can't just be writing this 20. I think that is something called repeat, and then we put one F arrow. I think the next sentence is four. So when you do this, you have also done the same thing. I think is that an error here? Let's see. I think I have an error here. I think it's just to put the number. Let me see it. It's been long I did such a thing. Repeat up to. I'm missing something. I should get that to it. Okay. Anyway, let's go back to doing it manually. We'll get back before in the when we redo this, we'll have to implement it using the automatically laying it out. So at this point, I don't know if you have any question or there is something that is not that is confusing because we need to understand it little by little before we have 100 and something line of code.
I have a question now.
Okay.
My question is, how were you able to manipulate that color when you are going to background color? You click something that brought something like a box and you started manipulating it, making it dark and listening. So how were you able to do it?
Okay. What I did, if you put your cursor here on the color, anywhere you have color, just place your cursor there. The IDE will bring this color palette for you, so that you can move this to mix your color to look at the one you want. You can then select anything. If I leave it at this point now, the color will change. You see that, and then you might prefer this color. So if you don't really know the color you want to use, you are just trying colors. It's just the perfect place to come and do your color mixing. You can come to this red as area. You can equally do this opacity setting, and then when you come to an area like this, you leave it. It's also changed. See, it's the same color, but the opacity is changing. And when you look at here, we now have RGB. The first time is only RGB. The RGB is red, green, blue. The primary colors we can mix to get other color, but when you now move this line, the opacity is also going to be affected. Then A will be added to it, and then you will see the last, instead of three like this, you now see the fourth one, which is representing the opacity too. So as we move here now, you see they are changing to 4, and then the last one you see 0.3 something, 0.4, just until you get to the one you want and you leave it. The color will change like that. So we can leave it to the one that doesn't have opacity. Okay, the syntax I was meeting here, you first add the number before the size. Our size is 1 FR. So you first add the number. That was what I was getting wrong. I first of all added the 1 FR before the number, which was wrong. So at this point, this is our calculator. We've gotten the.
Yes, sir. But yes, sir, I understand. Could ask Onya join Evoluzo Biko. This was the meaning of this one FR.
Okay, this is just a fraction. It specifies the size of your items on the screen, on the grid. If we don't put this, you can also use like using a number like 60 pixel to specify it's just the size on the screen. And you see that it's a different size we're giving them now. So, but using that, the grid is going to divide them equally, and they are going to be perfectly fitted the smallest possible size that it can take. Okay. I don't know. Did you get it? So that F arrow is just a fraction. It's saying one of the fraction. That is, if we have 4 here and you put F arrow, the browser is going to divide the space we have for the application for that particular div. Let's say we have 100 pages here. It's going to divide it into 4 and make sure that each of the grid area, like from this area, this one or this one, all of them are going to have equal sizes, because we say one fraction of this particular 4. So 4 will be divided by 5. All of them will have 1. But if you put a value like this, all of them will be given this particular value. But you can equally change the size of one of them. We can make this equals to take this line and the plus position to become to take two particular row instead of just one. When you move further in your study of CSS and grid system, you will be able to know understand those ones too. But at this point, we want everything to just be the same position, to take the same size, just like we have it in the default calculator that comes with Windows. But there are some calculator you will see that this particular equal sign can take both this position and that of the plus. You can do that also with grid. You can even make any of the item on that grid to take double space in the grid, which is fine. Now, what we want to do here now, we know that the space between these items are very small. In case we want it to have more space, we can put gap, and then when we put gap like this, and we can say 5 pixels, we want the gap to be 5 pixels. You see that we now have a bigger space among the item. Just like when you look at this particular one, the space between them are a bit bigger. So when you look at it and you look at ours, it's almost the same. We now have a more spaced element among themselves. Then there is also another one among in the grid that is called row gap. That one is only on the row. If you put row gap 5 pixels, it will only affect on the row, not column, but gap will affect all of them. So if we comment gap and put, you see that only our rows are spaced 5 pixels, but the columns are not spaced like that. So I think you also have a col gap. Do we have here column gap? So you can also put that to be 5. Let's say we make it 10 pixels so that we can see the difference, and then we save, then we comment this gap. So both of them can help you achieve different kinds of spacing. So you see that our rows have little spacing in comparison to our columns. The columns have bigger space between them, but the rows have smaller space. So you can, if you don't want the both sides, rows and columns, to have equal spacing, you can use row gap and column gap to give different. But in this case, what we just want all of them to have equal spacing so that it looks like a very nice grid like this. Okay, and then we look at let's give it a padding here, our button div, so that it will be a bit space from our input. So we can say our padding should be 10 pixels, padding from all side. Okay, so we've spaced it from all side. Okay, I think we are getting somewhere now. And then we can also increase the size of the item. We can also affect the size of the item. I think we might need to create a class separately that will do that for us. Okay, so from here now,
Hello.
hello.
Okay. Sorry, I came late from when I came to contact. I want to ask, this CSS is a, I guess it's a different thing altogether. This is the first time of
Yeah,
using CSS. So
yeah.
is there any explanation for class on it?
Actually, we were discussing before you joined that CSS is one of the technologies that you have on the internet. When you are building a website, CSS is an unavoidable technology for making your application look nice. Is with CSS now we have changed the color of our calculator. With the CSS, you can change different things about the application you are building. You can style it and make it look nicer than it would have looked without it. So you can do several manipulations with it to make your application look nice, including even animations. So the full meaning of CSS is cascading sequence, and it's just used to make to style your application, that is to beautify it. It takes care of anything about appearance of your website. It also helps you handle positioning of your element. Don't want to use your HTML to create the skeleton of your app, but you can use CSS to give the position of those individual items. You can use CSS to show how they appear. Just like the way we use CSS now, if you look at our HTML, there is nothing that shows this thing should be in this form. All of them are just, we just created everything in a straight inside one parent div called with the class buttons. And but we use CSS to make four items to appear in a row. We make in a single row, we make sure that four items will appear. Then in the we also make sure that the next fifth item should go to the next row until the fourth one also. And it's CSS that help us to do that. And what we use to do that is using this technology grid called grid display. The display tells the browser how this particular the content in our HTML should be displayed on the screen, irrespective of the way you wrote it on your HTML, just like the way we wrote everything here. All of them are inside one div. But we can now use CSS to tell the browser, see, oh, this thing that I've written, make sure they display in grid format. And grid is a row and column display system in Java in web technology. Okay. So when you have a grid system like this, you now this a particular line called grid template column. It's not telling the browser how many columns you will need to have in each row. And in this case, we say we want to have four columns, and each of the columns should be 60 pixels. Before we add, we'll just have a one F arrow telling the system to just divide it the way you want for us, but all of them should have equal sizes. But then in the course of demonstration, we say, okay, let's just try and give it a unique value by ourselves. And we give 60 pixels. Even if you like here, we can increase it to something else. So I don't know if that is more clearer to you.
It's like that one FR is more better because it make everything align.
They are still aligned now. What is just different is that they are now bigger, and
Yeah, no,
what increase is the width and not the height. So why that is why it looks a bit like that. But if we give it equal width and height also, it will now look more perfectly aligned. The other one, if you look at it, both the width and height are equal. That one F arrow. Sorry, let's go back to one F arrow, and then you look at it.
it-
Both the
what I mean is
images.
both the that container, the container this it make everything align the same, be the same this thing.
Okay.
Make the column be the same.
And
For the
it looks is better like that. Okay. So gift, do you get it? Hello, gift.
Yes, yes. I will still have to patch it together. I
Okay.
understand what you're saying.
All right. So we also have, apart from column, we also have with the one we call template row. Grid these with column and row. So we still have grid template rows. And that also, we can also say that we know we have 60 pixels there. We can also say let's have everything to be 60 pixels. Now you can see the one we have on top now is now in that form. We now have 60 pixels. We just put 160 pixels, and that is why you have it like this. So if we also say repeat, I think we can get it also like that. Let's see. We see repeat. What am I typing? Then we'll also put 4 comma 60 pixels. So you see we are having our code now in the 4 places, but our rows is not 4, our row is 6. So in order to get it perfect, everything, we now need to put 6 here because we have 6 rows. So when you now look at our calculator, the 6 rows are also having their height to be 60 pixels on just like the other one. Okay. So you can use grid template rows to affect the height of each of those items, how each row is. Then use grid template columns to affect number of columns and also, in this case, the size of each of the column. So in this case, we have given both of them to be both 60 pixels, both the column and the height. All right, and now I think they are more perfectly aligned, almost similar to what we have here. It's just that in this case, we have a different background of white. And this is even bigger. So if we want to move to that size, I think we should be considering something like 70 pixels and then 70 pixels. Okay. So we have been able to build our calculator interface. Let's now also style our input here. So we can also, we only have one input. So instead of giving it a class, we can pick input like this, use the HTML tag. You can style HTML tag directly, or you can create a class. Anytime you put dot, any name, that becomes a class. HTML and CSS work together. You can use a style, a class like this to style a particular element in HTML, or you can use the name of the tag like input, P for paragraph, div. You can use the tag name to style it, or you can use an ID. Just like the buttons we gave ID, we can use the ID, like we have an ID called CE, we can use hash CE to style it. So in this case, we can say, hey, anything that is hash CE, the background should be red for us. We can say background color should be red. So if we have anything like that, the one that have Nasi E is now going to appear red for us. And then we have an ID called equal. I think it's just equal. Let's see. And then we can say our equal should be blue. So we can say background color. Any item on the screen that is called equal in the ID should be blue. And you see our CE is now, our equal is now blue. Then we can say, okay, since the background is blue, the color of the ink text should be white. So we can then come here and put color should be white. And then we can also say the text color. The text is very small. We can also say font size should be large. So we can put SS large so that it should be very big. So we have changed the look of our equals button. Okay. Then if you want, you can also say add different styles to make it look different. You can decide to make it circular. It doesn't matter, it becomes circular. So like we can say, let's make border radius. The border radius is the degree of, and then we can say 50%, how circular we want it to be, and we style it. And then we now have our equal button is now rounded, unlike every other button there. So we can decide also to make all these other mathematical operation button like plus, divide, multiplication, and this one we can decide to color them separately. Although the one we are looking at here, all of them have the same color, but we can decide to say, okay, all the buttons are the rightmost, the last columns. We can use a grid to even style them separately, or we can also do the styling one by one. So we can then say, and we create a class like say action, action, and then we can say background color should all be um, let's say brown. Let's go here and select a different color. Okay, and then we can come and say their font size. Also say font size should be S large, SS large, and then the color should also be white. Okay, then we can then put this action on all the buttons that are action buttons, and then we have it here. This is our multiplication. We can then say class action. We come to this divide also and say class action. All of them are inheriting the same. Then we also come to this subtract and say class action. We come here also and say class action. We come, okay, we are not doing that on equal. I think we go up now and this delete and say class. No, delete is not there. Let's not go to delete. We stop at divide. I think, yes, we stop at divide. I think that's okay. So if we come here, save our code, we see that that line is now coloring differently for us. All right, so our calculator might not really look like the other, but I'm just showing you with your CSS, you can do so many more magic on the screen, differentiate the look of each of the item. Okay, I hope we are making progress. Okay, so now let's style our input. I was talking about styling our input. We can then say the height of this input, the height should be like, let's say 50 pixels, let's say 50 pixels. And then we see that it has increased in size, which is nice. And we can also say the width, it should be 100% of the parent. Okay. And then this is our width. Looking at this one, I think the size is not. It's because we have padding here. So let me remove the padding we have here on the left and right so that they will both align on the same position and just have the space on the top. Okay, so let's go back. Where did we have padding? That was on actions, on the buttons. So where do we have padding? Okay, so what we can have now in our padding, I think we have what is called padding top. Do we have padding? Yeah, so we have 10 pages. So it's only on the top we have our padding. So this is cool now. We now have both of the actions and the input to align properly. Okay, so on our inputs, we can equally give it a different border. Let's say we have a border, we have dash. Let's give it some gray. Need a color that we, okay, and then we say dotted, and then 1 pixels, let's say 2 pixels. Okay, so we have given it a different kind of look. So what I'm doing this one is just showing you can also style your input to look a bit different. So you see our input now is not just the regular input. Like this one, we can decide to just make it look neutral like this. Only when you click, you have something entering. But in this our case, we just decide to give it a border so that it just look a little bit stylish. Although, okay, I think we can leave it like this. And okay, any question at this point?
Yes, sir. So the question I have this padding top. I didn't see the effect too.
No,
The
that
so
is.
my
Look
question
at
is the dot action.
in
As,
between.
as time goes, you bringing all those function out, or the thing is what you need to do. I don't know where the dot action is coming from.
Okay, the dot action is a class we've created in CSS, and we are going to add it in the element where we want them to be. All the buttons that specify the mathematical operations. These ones perform actions on the numbers you type when you are doing your calculations. All these things perform actions on these numbers, isn't it? So I just say, okay, let's give it a class of action so that we attach action to all the buttons that are going to perform actions on numbers. So we can equally add them to this line, this S1, because they equally perform actions on numbers. So we can come to the square root and add it. So if we come to square root, you see the square root perform actions on numbers. So we can say this is an action button too. Then we can go to the up again, look at which one again, the S square, which is S square also perform actions on a button. Is the square of a number. So we can also say this is action. And then we have the half, 1 over S, which is the 1 over S. So we can also give it a class of action. And when we save, we see all of them that perform actions on numbers are there. We have now given them a different style. I don't know if you will now understand why the action was there. So we can also come and create a class called numbers so that we can style all our numbers buttons separately. So, and then remember, we want to make them extra large too. So we can say font size and SS large. In in some cases, we can combine these numbers and this equal. I think let's first finish doing them individually. We now do combine chaining of classes to create to give them the same if they all have the same CSS styling. We can chain them together and just create it once. So we can then say, yeah, the font size should be SS large. I think let's just leave it like that. I've not added it to any number. So let's now go to our calculator HTML. This is our 7. 7 is a number. So let's add it on 7. Say class number. Let me call it number instead of numbers. And then we can also say class number. We have our 9 class number. All the numbers now we are styling them. So this is not a number. So we skip that one. We'll come to 4. And then we'll say our class number. This class is those things we use represented as dot in CSS. You link them in HTML using class. The one you use hash, you link them. You don't need to link them in CSS because the browser will do the identification of what have that ID. The hash there is representing the ID. Like if we want to style this button, we can use hash 4. The browser is going to pick any element on the HTML that have an ID of 4. So in that case, you don't need to represent them in the any other way because you've done the chaining already in your CSS so long as an ID. But if it is a class, you need to come. If you started with a dot, you need to come to your HTML and apply that name of the style as using a class, like say class equals, then you apply, you put the name of that your class. And the browser will do the job of adding any particular style you add there to your the look and feel of your app. Okay, so we have increased the numbers, the size of our number. I think it will be nice. We'll also add it to this one so that everything on the screen we just have that size. So now all of them are buttons. So instead of doing it here, you know, and then doing it here, we can then remove it from here, the font size, then remove it from numbers. So we don't need anything like numbers again. So what we can don't just do here, and I told you you can style the HTML element directly. So we now have our font style button, all the buttons to have the same font size by just using button to represent all of them. All the size of all of them now have grown to be able to fit into the size we specify in the button. So this is how you can style all the elements that that resemble themselves together. So if you now look at, I think we have gotten what we want to achieve in our look here. Okay. So this is the look and feel of our calculator. I guess you have a nice looking calculator here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I'm thinking we change this to yellow green, green yellow thereabout.
Yeah, sir. Since you've actually changed it to button,
Yeah.
so the dot numbers, the class you added numbers, are you going to change it to the button, or you still leave it at the same thing as
No,
numbers, or you change it to the button, sir?
what happened is we can then come here and remove the class because the class does not even exist and we have removed the class. So we can come here now and remove the class numbers because they don't exist again in our CSS. So it's actually irrelevant. What we can do here, we can just come and then look at our code and say in our VS Code and say replace all of them with empty space. So we have removed all of them in everywhere it appears in our
Okay,
page.
sir. Okay, sir. Noted, sir.
All right. So now our calculator interface is ready. What we'll now do tomorrow is to write the actions that we make them to perform what they are supposed to do. I hope it's cool.
Yeah, you
Yeah, it's
can
quite
Yes,
understood. I want you to
it's
just go
very
to
cool.
the calculator.html. Just from the start, just scroll down from the start. I want to see something.
All right, this is it. This is from the top. Everything from the head up are regular things that we have been seeing in our applications, in our HTMLs. And then what is different here is we now created a parent div that holds everything, which and we gave it a class container. So when you come to our CSS. Let me zoom this now. When you come to your CSS, let me also divide this thing into two screens so that we can have CSS on the left and this one on the other side. So let me close this. So now if we come to our CSS, we now have dot container, which is what is represented here, class container. So everything we have written in this container is what is affecting the look of our calculator. Okay, so what is affecting the look of our calculator? So if we want also, we can make this calculator to appear on the center of the screen. I think for us to do that, we can, since everything is in the body, we can just say body of our something, and then the text align, we can say center. I think this will do the job. Alternatively, we have different ways we can make this. Oh, it's not, I think that's what is happening. Okay. Let me just leave this now. We can, so from our HTML, we can do style our work anyhow we want it from here, from our what is it, our CSS, and give it any look and feel that we want, and we will get our result the way we want it. So this after the container, we have our header, which we have been doing in previous app, and we call the header calculator app. Then we have a div inside there. This div is just holding our input, which is we gave it a class test input, though we didn't write anything in test input here. So if we had wanted the padding we did here, we could have just we also equally just create a class called test input so that we know test input. Then we'll do our padding instead of here now. We can then do padding button, and then we'll say temp page. We still achieve the same thing, but the padding is no longer instead of padding, or we can even say margin. Now the difference between padding and margin, padding add the space to the element you are adding style, while margin add the space outside the element. So for this, our margin here is we still have the same result, but the space is no longer inside this input. The space is outside, in between this and the other section. But if we use padding, the space will be added on the element that is holding the style.
I want to ask something. These these that life class. All the test one, test one, all the things.
Gift, I didn't get you.
I said, oh, these are first rule, second rule, third rule. All the styling is on the HTML, not on the JavaScript.
How we style it in the HTML?
No, like all these styling, I'm seeing a style class equal to first input type and I'm also seeing a type class for first row, second row, third row, and fourth row. All
Oh,
I'm asking is all these.
no, what we did there, why I gave it this is we just need to know what is. You can mute your mic so that you'll be able to hear us. Why I gave it the first row is just for me to identify, because we were looking on this Windows calculator and we know this is our first row. From the percentage to this delete button is our first row. So I was just looking at here and be creating the button. So after finishing the things on the first row, I move and create another comment, second row. This is a comment. It doesn't affect anything in the code, just for us to know. We can remove them. And then I create 4 buttons also. And after the 4 button, I also commented third row so that we just know the things that will appear on our rows. That is why we are just labeled them, but the comment doesn't really do anything in the code. So what is important here is that we have two major sections of our code. We have the buttons, which will perform actions, and then we have our input, where our actions will be displayed. When you click a number, it will be displayed on the input. And then when you do mathematical operation, the result will appear on the input. Then this is just our header for our app. Okay, I think it's a bit clear for us. And if there is any question, you will still respond to it. When we come tomorrow, what we are going to do now is by tomorrow, I should be able to look for codes which will represent all these things for us the way they are supposed to appear. And then we will move into implementing some of the actions like addition, subtraction, and multiplication. Okay, I guess we'll close that today, except you have another question.
Please, oh, I will need this video from the start so that I can follow up because I didn't meet up early in the class. So I can go through it this night.
Okay, no problem. You will have it. All right,
Thank you.
guys. Enjoy the rest of the night till we meet again tomorrow.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Yeah, good night.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.